All right, so first, just a reminder as to why we're doing this in the first place. Here's an original Super Nintendo. It's been modified to fit Japanese cartridges. That's kind of not the point. And we're going to my RetroTink via S-Video. Okay, I've got the cable for Super Nintendo. It only has S-Video on it, and my RetroTink handles S-Video, so of course we want to use S-Video. And then if we plug this into the Super Nintendo and turn that on, there it is working in S-Video. Okay. Now, if we take the exact same cable and we go to the Super Nintendo Jr, I don't know what to call this thing. I don't think it officially was called this. Was it officially called the Super Nintendo Jr? As far as I'm concerned, it was officially just called the Super Nintendo. We call it the Super Nintendo Jr because I think that's what in Japan the Super Famicom, when it got this design, was the Super Famicom Jr. It's the 1997 revision of the Super Nintendo. Okay, same thing. It's been modified to fit the Japanese cartridges. Okay, if we turn this one on, there's no power light, which kind of sucks, but that, again, it's not the point of this video. The point of the video is, as far as the RetroTink is concerned, it's not even getting a video signal, so it's not kicking on. The original Super Nintendo, out of the box, supports composite, S-Video, and RGB. So if you got SCART cables, you can run RGB. As far as I know, the Super Nintendo Jr, or the 1997 revision here, it supports composite and RGB, I believe. It might not even support RGB without mods. I'm not 100% sure. But I have a feeling it does, which is weird. So again, they just skimped out on the S-Video. We're going to fix that today. We are going to add S-Video to the SNES Jr or the 1997 revision. All right, so to open up a Super Nintendo, you're going to need one of these game bits. I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but it's... Well, I'll show you when I get one of the screws out. So these are the screws that the Super Nintendo is held together with. All right, 4 screws. These screws kind of suck. I think it's partially my game bit isn't like 100% the right size. It's a hair too small. But anyways, there we go. There's inside of a Super Nintendo Jr. If you were doing the modification to play Japanese games, you would take this part off. And there's little tabs in the back corners that you cut out. It's just a physical block. The region locking on the Super Nintendo is basically just plastic tabs that stop the cartridge from going in. The different countries' cartridges from going into the slot. Inside, it's going to be a Phillips screwdriver, of course. I'm imagining we've got the screws holding the cartridge slot in. Might be a little bit longer than the rest, but I don't think it's going to be too different. So I'm going to set those to a side. Thinking the rest will be the same. They might all be the same. Nope, they're a little bit shorter. Okay. So I'm guessing the rest of the screws are all going to be the same, a little bit shorter compared to the 2 that go into the cartridge slot, which of course is fairly normal. And let's see in the back here, I'm assuming that's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say, assuming there's something holding the back in here. I mean, there's one screw at the back. It's going through the AV port. And that one looks longer. So yeah, that one looks the same as, so the two that are going through the cartridge slot and one at the back that's going through the AV port are the 3 longer screws. And oh, that's it. Okay. So there we go. There's the Super Nintendo Jr, as I keep calling it. Again, was that ever an official name? Some people call it the Super Nintendo 2. Super Nintendo Jr. Again, it's like the 1997 re-release. So let's see if this metal plate will come off. Yes, it does. The metal plate just comes off there. And there she is. So one big difference between this and the earlier Super Nintendos is they've consolidated, I think it's 3 of the chips into one. Is it the sound chip, the CPU, and the PPU? Basically, the 3 chips that really make a Super Nintendo unique have been combined into one chip. So they did this later in the Super Nintendo lifespan. So some of the, original looking Super Nintendos are a 1 chip. But of course, all the juniors are going to be a 1 chip. So the 1 chips typically have potential for better image quality. But of course, they didn't hook up the S-Video. So let's see. Looking at the board here. Where is the video encoder chip? I think it's back here. So we're gonna have to remove the heat sink from the voltage regulator, aren't we? So the 2 screws on the bottom holding this metal heat sink in, these screws are a little bit shorter than any of the other screws. And they've got little kind of like spring-loaded washers. And of course that is screwed into the voltage regulator there. So yeah, I'm gonna have to take that screw out. Probably the same screw as the other 2. And it feels like the plate is already loose, but something is still holding it on. Oh, there we go. Oh, don't drop the Super Nintendo. I did drop the screw though. Well, let me find that screw. Yeah, that screw is a little bit different than the other 2 that were holding the shield in. It's slightly longer, and it looks like it's got 2 washers on there, so keep that in mind. You'll want to keep that one separate. So that's your metal heat sink. So that's your metal heat sink there. Did they use any thermal paste? It doesn't look like they used any thermal paste. That's your voltage regulator there. The chip we're most interested in is going to be this guy right here. This is the video encoder. So here's the parts involved for this. We got 2 capacitors and 2 resistors. That's it. It's like $1 worth of parts. For me in Canada, I walked into a retail store and I walked out with these parts about just under $2 Canadian. For Nintendo back in 1997, buying these parts in bulk, we're talking like 10 cents a part. 40 cents worth of parts, if that, for them to have implemented the S-Video. So that's how confident they were that no one was using S-Video, or that they just really didn't want to put S-Video on this system to save like 40 cents. Again, at the most. Probably less than that. Probably saved them a quarter. But this is the same system that doesn't have a power LED on it. So again, Nintendo was looking to save every penny on this thing. Again, what would a power LED have cost them to put on in 1997. So to start, we're going to take the electrolytic capacitor. There's two capacitors in this mod, but one of them is, I guess it's like a disc style. The electrolytic is going to have, of course, a stripe on the side telling us which side is the negative side. And on that side, I'm going to cut the lead a little short. All right. And then on our resistor, I'm going to cut the leads a little short on there too. And then we're going to solder one of the sides. Well, we're going to solder the negative side of the capacitor to this resistor here, like so. I know this is hard to see. I'm basically just following the guide on Retro RGB, so I'll have a link in the description to that. And again, we're just prepping some of these capacitors and resistors with the wire. I got some wire here. I got two different colors so we can try and keep track. This is 22 gauge. Ideally, you might want something 26, maybe even 30 gauge. This wire might be a little on the thick side. But, geez, again, I'm working with what I got here, so I'm going to sort of tin my soldering tip up here a little bit. Alrighty, how's that look? That looks alright. Alright, I am going to try and tack that on there quickly. Just like so. Alright, I'll clean that up off camera. Certain things with the camera in the way are not going to be easy to do. I'm trying to make this as easy for myself, but also let you see what I'm doing. So we got that tacked together. I'm going to clean that up, and then we're going to tin the other sides and get ready for the wire. Again, there's basically two circuits here. There's the Chroma and the Luma, so I'm going to use different colors. I'm going to use the white wire for the luminance, which makes sense. It's a black and white. It's the brightness, basically. And I'm going to use an orange for the Chroma, which is the color. So I'm going to use the color wire for the Chroma and the white wire for the luminance, just to help keep track of it. And then, yeah, we'll continue on. All right, so basically this chip here that says sRGB on it, that's our video encoder. We've got to get the pin of one of these capacitors onto, I believe the luminance is going to be somewhere around here, and the Chroma is basically pin 12, I believe, right here, which can't quite see. This is how thick my wire is. Again, this is 22 gauge wire. So we can try and solder the wire right to one of these pins, but as you can see, well, that's not going to be too bad. You can either solder the wire directly to the pin, or you could try and solder the capacitor leg directly to the pin. For me personally, I think it's going to be easier to do it with the wire and then figure out / find a place where I actually want these resistors and capacitors to sit. Once we get the once we get the Chroma and the Luma off that chip, they're basically going to go to the corresponding pins on here, which this is the, the AV out port. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to use wire to do this. I am going to use flux. Where is my flux? So this is my MG Chemicals No Clean Flux Paste. We are definitely going to be using flux for this. Flux is something that when I got into soldering, I didn't quite understand. And for a long time, I didn't use it. Until one day I did. And good Lord, if you've used it, you understand if you're into soldering. You really want to use flux for stuff like this. It just makes it so much easier. So, yeah, we're going to go something like that and something like that. Okay. This chip is like smaller than it looks when you're looking at it in pictures, that's for sure. Mine looks a little bit different than the one in the instructions for on the Retro RGB. Their chip like the text on it is different, so I can't go by the picture. I got to go by the counting the pins. On my chip, it's right in between the N and the D, the pin that we need. So I'm going to get some of this flux out of the way. So we get 13, 14, 15, 16. Is it pin 16 that I want? Let me double check this here. I got to take my fucking glasses off to do the fine work, because I'm nearsighted. It's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of solder to that pin first. Beautiful. We can kind of bring it off to the edge of where this cart slot is. That's perfect. And that's 13, 14, 15, 16, yeah, pin 17. So now we're going to do the wire for the Chroma. So I got my wire stripped there, and I got a little bend on the end of it. Again, I'll tin that up with a bit of solder. Do it to it. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So let me give you a look at that. So we got the colored wire on pin 12 and the white wire on pin, was it 17? And I know there's lots of flux there. It looks dirty. So what we're going to do is clean that up. Flux makes the solder flow much nicer, but it's messy. It could be corrosive. I'm not 100% certain on that, but you don't necessarily want to leave that much of it just sitting on your circuit board. So got some 99% IPA. And we're just going to clean off as much of that as we can. We can soak as much alcohol on this board as we want. It's going to evaporate pretty quickly. That is the idea. All right. So I'll give you a good look at that now that it's cleaned up. And so we got our luminance wire there and our chroma wire there. All right, so that's what our passives look like on the top side. Let's go over to the bottom side and work on that AV port. All right, so again, I'm gonna flex that up. Let's see, it's these two pins here. All right, I'm gonna add a little extra solder to these pins just to make this a little bit easier. Again, I'm gonna take my glasses off. Hopefully I'm not blocking you. I'm totally blocking your view with my hand right now. Well, sorry. Again, making it as easy for myself is more important to me right now. All right. So got some extra solder on there. And again, we got a white wire and an orange wire. The chroma is going to be, well, again, how does this count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The chroma is going to be 8. The luma is going to be 7. We're running them through a hole on the far side, so it's going to look a little something like that. This hole just so happens to be a good spot to bring your wires through from top and bottom. So we'll fold the chroma wire like so, and we'll fold the luma wire up the other way. And I'm gonna tack these on. You know what? Let's see if I can get a better view for you here. It's gonna look a little something like that. And I'll do the the other for the Luma. All right, so it looks a little something like that. Again, we got to clean that up, but you get the point. And then those wires run through this hole over here. Well, I fucked up. And kind of disappointed. This really sucks. Maybe you can see where pin 18 used to be. And you can also see, I think it was pin 12. You can also see where pin 12 used to be. So those two pins, because they weren't used on the board, I don't think they were actually, I don't think they had pads. So I don't think those two pins were soldered to the board. Because of that, they're not anchored down. And what happened, I soldered those wires to those pins, and then I went to move those wires around, and really all I was doing was bending the pin right where it comes out of the chip. This is super easy to break those pins, so you gotta be really careful. I wish there was a heads up in the instructions about that. I'm not the only one that's done this. Googling the issue, I saw on Reddit pictures of other people that have broken the pins off that chip. That really sucks. Fortunately, it doesn't affect the Super Nintendo. Those were only the pins that weren't used for S-Video. S-Video didn't work on this. It will never work on this. But with composite, it still works. It's still a perfectly good working Super Nintendo Jr. I cleaned it out inside. We're gonna put it back together, and well, that's the end of that, I guess. And just to show that it's still working, I had to get some composite cables out, and yeah, I mean, it still works. It's a functioning Super Nintendo, as it always was. So yeah, that looks really washed out in the video. Does not look that washed out in person. Yeah, whatever. It works. It's a perfect working Super Nintendo Jr. 1997. I'm so bummed out, but you know, at least I didn't wreck the Super Nintendo. If I would have wrecked the Super Nintendo and it didn't work anymore, I'd really be fucking depressed. So, yeah, I mean, if anything, it's cleaner. It's a cleaner Super Nintendo Jr. than when we started. But, yeah, it can never be S-modded at this point without at least swapping that chip out. Whatever. It is what it is, I guess. See you guys later.